It is the final week of our studies in Ephesians. So some of you are probably like, finally, right? But hey, it was a summer series, so there's good news and there's bad news. Yes, we're coming to the end of our summer series, but if we're coming to the end of a summer series, that must mean we're coming to the end of summer. And so, yeah, that means school is back, homework. It means there's going to be days where we're like, why did we complain about the heat? It's so bitterly cold. All of that is coming, but here we are. We're wrapping up Ephesians. We've hit every chapter. We've taken 2 weeks per chapter. This is the final installment. We are at the end of Ephesians chapter 6. And I don't know if you sensed a theme in all the songs. There were battles, fighting, all this fun stuff. Well, if you're familiar with the end of Ephesians chapter 6, that's because of what we're going to be talking about today, and it's the armor of God. We're talking about the armor of God. Now, this is a very familiar passage for some people, where Paul talks about putting on the full armor of God and lists off all of that in wonderful detail. But before we dive into the end of Ephesians, I want us to go further back in the Bible to the Old Testament of 1 Samuel chapter 17. Now, we're not going to turn there in our Bibles, but this is where you find the account of David and Goliath. And I love David and Goliath. In fact, two of my favorite accounts in the Old Testament are Gideon, and the other one's David and Goliath. I just love these accounts. And hint to those in student ministry, if you remember last week, we did Gideon. Guess what we're doing this week? All right, so you might want to pay attention for tonight if you're in the student ministry, because we're going to be talking about David and Goliath. All right, so let me give you a quick summary of David and Goliath in case you're not familiar with the story. So the Israelites and the Philistines are fighting again, right? And so they're on either side of this valley, and there's a battle going on, and David is tending the flock back at home because he's the youngest, and his dad is like, hey, I want you to go, and I want you to take this food up to your brothers on the front line, get them this food. Also, hey, you might as well find out what's happening while you're up there, right? And so David is going out, and he goes to the front line, finds his brothers, gives them the food, asks them what's going on, and he finds out what's happening is, instead of this great battle taking place between the two armies, the Philistines have said, hey, we got an idea. We'll send out our champion. You send out your champion. We'll just let them go at it, mano a mano, and whoever wins, we'll declare the victor, and so that army wins. So instead of all of us fighting, it's just two people, and then whoever wins, their side wins, which is a great idea for the Philistines because their champion is named Goliath. And even if you're not, you haven't read the Bible much, or you're not very religious, most people have some kind of understanding of David and Goliath. I mean, we even use it in sports, like when there's a team that's super dominant that's going to go against a team that really doesn't have as much skill and things like that. They're like, oh, this is like David versus Goliath. Or during the Ukraine war, when Russia was invading Ukraine, a lot of people referred to that as David and Goliath because Russia with its big army and Ukraine with a small army. So we reference David and Goliath a lot. So now you're getting the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. And so here it is. David's like, oh, so this is what's happening. He's like, who's going to go out and fight Goliath? And everyone's like, nobody. Because none of us want to go face this guy. Have you seen him? He's huge. Like, he even has people who carry his weapons and his shield for him. And no. And so everyone's scared. Everyone's like, what's going to happen? And David is like, guys, this is easy. I'll do it. And so he goes back, and they're like, hey, we got some volunteer. They go back to the king, King Saul, and they're like, hey, we got a volunteer. And King's like, yes, finally. And then they bring in this little shepherd boy, and I can imagine he's just like, oh, we're doomed. Right? none of my soldiers, no one out there, no one with any training is willing to go against Goliath. And you bring me this little kid. Fantastic. So, now, part of me is like, the king agrees to this. Why? Why would the king agree to this? But that's a different message. Anyway, so they bring David in, and they're like, well, you can't just go out there like this, right? So what they do, and I don't know if they purposely put the king's armor on him to try to hype him up. You know, it's like before a basketball game, and they're turn off all the lights, and then they got the steam going, the smoke going, the lights flashing everywhere, and they're, you know, trying to get everybody hyped up for this game. I think they were trying to hype up David, right? So they bring out Saul, the king's armor, and they put all the armor on David, and I think it was one, you know, you're going to need the best armor we possibly have because you're going against a beast of a man, right? And so if anyone would have really good armor, it's going to be the king. So they put all the king's armor on David, and I love the VeggieTales version of this because, you know, poor Junior Asparagus, I don't know, he looks like a rocket ship at this point, and he can't move anywhere. But that's actually what the Bible says. It says David couldn't even move in all this armor because it was too big for him. And so David's just like, oh, no, take all this off. I got this. He's like, because David knew something no one else did. It wasn't his battle. It wasn't his fight. It was God's fight. He's like, look, I don't need all this because it's God's fight. So he goes out with his sling and his 5 stones. Goliath's out there decked out in his armor, tall, beastly of a man, throws some insults at David, and David's just like, cool, whatever, dude. All the smack talk you want, have at it. I got the best smack talk there is. I got God, you don't. I'm going to win. Now, that's Oveliism, but he kind of says that, right? So he goes out to this battle, and that's the thing. Goliath is like mocking Israel, going, what? Who do you think I am to send this dog out here? What's going on? But David had something. He had the secret weapon that no one else saw or knew, and that was God. Long story short, David gets his sling, boom, launches the rock, hits Goliath square in the head, kills Goliath. Israel wins because their champion won. Plus, there was a skirmish afterwards. They chased after him and all that. But it was interesting because here are all the experts trying to tell David how to fight this battle, how to fight this war. And he's saying, no. This isn't my battle. This isn't my war. This is God's. And so I'm going to go with his plan. So put a pin in that, and let's move on. Remember what we were just talking about. We'll move on to Ephesians chapter 6. Now, we're not going to go over all the last part of chapter 6. We're just going to hit these few verses. And so let's dive in. Paul writes, therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So, I have heard a gazillion messages on this passage of Scripture. I've preached a few messages on this. One of my favorite that I heard was actually in a church where the staff member who served as my middle school pastor, he graduated with a history degree, which, you know, when you're looking for a middle school pastor, of course, you want someone who has a history degree. I don't know how that happened, but he did. And so he gave a message on this once that he went through extreme detail. He loved studying anything historical. He went through extreme detail of what the armor would have actually looked like. You know, so Paul, if you are thinking, when you hear this, if you're thinking like the armor like you see knights fighting in, and they're all shiny and all that. Okay, you got the wrong stuff. Okay, this is Roman type soldier armor, so it's going to be a lot of leather and some bronze and brass and things like that. But he went through great detail, not only of what each piece would look like, but the order of which they would put it on and why you needed to put it on in that order and what each thing would do with the Roman soldier and how it corresponded with this. And it was really interesting. And I've heard all sorts of messages go through, and they delve in deep on each specific part of armor and why it's important, how we implement that in our lives. And I'm not going to do any of that today, because I think all of that is pointless and useless if we don't get this one other part correct. The most important part of this passage is not the armor that is listed, but it's that first sentence. Therefore, put on the full armor of God. And that's what I want to dive into. Therefore, put on the full armor of God. So I want to dissect this pretty good, because I feel like if we don't get that part right, the rest of it doesn't matter. Doesn't hold water. So therefore, put on the full armor of God. Now, if you put something on, that means it wasn't already part of you, right? I don't put on my hands and my head each morning. My mom used to always give the expression, you lose your head if it wasn't attached, kind of thing. I was that kind of person. But what is me, I have. What is me, I don't have to put on. But if something's outside of me, if something is beyond me, that's the kind of stuff I have to put on. So God's armor is something that is not instinctively part of who you are. It's something that God can provide for you. And when we realize we have to put something on, it means it's coming from somewhere else than from within. It's coming from another location. It's beyond what we already have. It's not just intrinsically a part of us. And so the first thing is we need to understand, to put on the full armor of God, we need to trust that God has armor for us to put on, and we need to be willing to put on that armor. Now, I want to go to the next part. The full armor. We don't get to pick and choose which pieces of armor we're going to put on. If we are going to be followers of Christ, and we're going to be stepping into this battle, because life is, folks, there's trials. Even as Christ followers, there are trials. There are times when it is a struggle and it is a battle. So every day, we're all even in this spiritual battle, as if you read the rest of chapter 6, talks about the devil and his schemes, and the armor is to help us to be able to fight this spiritual battle that we're going through. So we're all involved in some kind of spiritual battle here. But if we're going to really have what we need for this battle, we need to put on the full armor of God. It's not like you get to go, okay, so armor a la carte. So I think I'll take the helmet and the shoes, the belts. I've gained too much weight, so I don't think that's going to fit that well. So we'll put that one off. We don't get to pick and choose. No, here's the armor. Put it all on. Because if you don't put it all on, guess what? It's almost as if it's like the warranty is null and void. Because you are not assembling this as instructed, right? Have any of you ever gotten any kind of complex piece of furniture or a toy or electronic that you have to assemble yourself, and you look at the instructions and go, right? And you try to do it yourself and you get all done. You're like, yes, success. And I only have 5 pieces left over. I'm sure they're not important. We'll just run with it. And if you do it that way and then something goes wrong and all of a sudden it explodes or whatever, and then you call them up and say, hey, so I didn't really pay attention to your instructions, but I'd really like you to replace that for me. They're going to be like, no, right? Because they're like, no, you need to follow the instructions. You need to do it as we have told you to do it. That's the proper way. When it comes to the armor of God, folks, we need to put on the full armor. We cannot pick and choose. Here's what's happening when we pick and choose. You are always making a statement. I learned this from Andy Stanley. It's great. I wish I would have heard this earlier in life when my girls were younger. But he had this great way of kind of disciplining his kids when they were growing up. Say, for example, someone left their towel on the bathroom floor. Instead of him going and picking it up and hanging it up for them, he would call the kid, whoever left it there, have them come to the bathroom and say, ask me to pick that up for you. They're like, no, don't make me do it. No, you need to ask me to pick that up for you. Because by you leaving it on the floor, that is actually what you are saying. You are expecting someone to pick that up for you, so I'm going to make you verbalize it. I'm going to make you stand here and tell me to my face, please, I want you to pick that up and hang it up for me. I don't want to do that, right? So our actions are saying something, right? Whether we mean to or not, we're speaking loud and clear. So here's our actions. When we choose to not put on a piece of armor that God is supplying, you know what we're saying? Hey, you know what? Your helmet's kind of good. Mine's better. Anytime we choose to say, you know what, God, you've got a plan for my life. You've got a direction that you want me to follow. That's okay. I'm going to go this direction. What we're saying is God, creator of all, God Almighty, nice try. I think I got a better way. And that's why Paul is saying, look, when it comes to the armor of God, we need to put on the full armor, not just pick and choose. All right, so therefore put on, we talked about that, the full armor, okay, got that, of God. Of God. Man, how many times in life are we trying to go through life, go through this battle, and we're putting on our own armor? And we think it's shiny and pretty, and it is great, and it's made of paper. And it's not going to defend us one bit. It's just going to tear and rip. So we need to not only put on armor, we not only need to put on the full armor itself, but we need to remember the armor we need to put on is the armor of God. God's armor, not our own. Now, let's go back to the story of David. And here's the interesting thing, right? I just got done saying we need to put on the full armor. And they put on the full armor. And David's like, can't work, not going to happen. So they took the armor off, right? And you're going, well, that doesn't make sense. You told us we need to put on all the armor. No, I said we need to put on the full armor of God. And they were trying to put on the full armor of Saul. See, they've been in battle. They knew. They had all the experience. They wanted to do what was best for this poor little shepherd boy, and they were trying to give him all the advice and give him all the top armor and all that. And so they were giving him all the human effort they could possibly give. And David realized, hey, I don't need this junk. What I need is God's armor, and it's God's fight, so I'm going to go out there with God as my protector. In life, folks, we sometimes get mixed up on what armor to put on. And we come up with our own ideas, and we listen to some experts, and we think, oh, they want what's best for us, and so we start following their plan, and we start substituting some of God's armor for some armor that someone else is telling us to put on. And all it does is weaken it. And David, here's another point that I brought up earlier. David realized that the fight was God's fight. So all of us are going through this fight. All of us are going through a battle. And Paul is saying, look, we're all in this battle where there is a war that goes on, a spiritual battle. The winners are going to get to spend eternity with God. And the losers are going to be separated from God for eternity. This is a battle for your eternity. And here's the amazing part. You may feel like you're battling this day in and day out. And if you feel like you're battling this day in and day out, I want to tell you, there may be a chance that you're being tricked by the enemy. The enemy has convinced you that this fight is your fight. Instead of what David realized, this fight's not my fight. This fight belongs to God. Yeah, I have a part, but I'm just a part. It's God's fight. And we can get so caught up on the daily battle, but the amazing thing is God is focused on the eternal war. You know, in a war, there are many, many little battles. World War II is made up of many, many battles. But you don't win the war by winning just a battle. Winning one battle doesn't make you the victor. But we can get so caught up in today's battle that, oh my goodness, we get so surrounded, we get so overwhelmed, we feel like we can't breathe, and we feel like we're not going in the right direction, we feel like we're losing, we feel like the world's completely against us, we feel like there's nowhere to go, we feel like we're in the dark, and we're lost and confused, and we get so focused on that daily battle, and we feel like we have to win, we have to win, we have to know what's going on, we have to get the answers, we have to win this battle. And God is saying, look, I know that there's different battles, but I'm not as interested or I'm not as concerned about just each individual battle. I'm concerned about your war for your eternity. Because even if you suffer a little today, I'd rather you suffer a little bit today, but you spend eternity with me. So let's not get so caught up on the daily battle that we lose sight of the eternal war. Anyway, so David realizes, look, everyone else is trying to put on some other kind of armor. And all I need to do is I need to put on the full armor of God. Now, here's the deal. So what's the full armor of God look like? Well, then you stand firm with the belt of truth. Okay, your armor, it's not your truth. It's God's truth. When we're talking armor, we need to remember what we're looking at. So it's not your truth, it's not worldly truth, it's God's truth. And we can go through each piece of this armor. The righteousness, it's not yours. Oh my goodness. My righteousness as your lead pastor, do you know what my righteousness is? It is filthy rags. My righteousness is nothing, but oh my goodness, am I so thankful that I can cling and put on the righteousness of God. It's not my efforts. My efforts will not save me. My efforts will not wash away one sin of my life. Man, when I start to try to become super religious, and it's all about my actions and my do's and my don'ts, I've taken off God's armor and I started putting on my own. Oh, man, it's got to be about my righteousness. Oh, it's got to be about my truth. Oh, I'll save myself. But it's about God's armor. Righteousness is God's righteousness. It's God's gospel peace. So the most important thing about this, and you can read through this and you can study the rest, that's great. But I just want to tell you, unless you get that first sentence right, none of the rest matters. Therefore, you need to put on the full armor of God. Here's the deal. David goes out to fight Goliath, and we're looking at David with human eyes. Man, it would have been awesome to be able to see David through God's eyes. We were in a small group once, and I forget which telescope. They keep on coming up with more and more telescopes, but right. And so there was this telescope that they just sent out a bunch of pictures with different images through this telescope using different lenses. Like, here's just through the infrared, and here's through this light sequence and all this. And the way that the stars and everything in the galaxy just looked was like, whoa, this is amazing. We see it in just one way. And now through this telescope, we're able to see it completely different, seeing colors we don't normally see, seeing light we don't normally see. And it's just so amazingly beautiful. And the one guy in our small group said, I wonder if this is how God sees it. He said, we see it, and we think, oh, this is amazing. He said, but there's so much more to it that we can't even see. And it's there, but we can't see it. It just shows you just how amazing God is. And I wonder if when God is watching David walk out to that battlefield with Goliath, that everyone else is seeing this shepherd boy who has his sling. He's got 5 rocks, right? And I wonder if when God is looking down, he is fully armored. He has a battalion of angels around him. What it actually looked to God to be wearing the full armor of God rather than King Saul human armor. And he's going, man, that is so much better protection than what you were going to offer. We need to put on the full armor of God. And sometimes, folks, it's going to look ridiculous and silly to the world. We're going to look like little shepherds going out to fight a huge giant. And people are going to look at us and they're going to go, are you crazy? What's wrong with you? This isn't going to work. No. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you put enough away. Don't give to other people. Make sure you've got enough for yourself. Now, you don't need to be nice to that person. Do you realize they're backstabbing you to the boss day in and day out? Why are you treating them kindly? Man, you need to go after them. It's going to be you or them probably come the next round of cuts. So, man, you need to go after them. Don't treat them nice. Don't say nice things about them. There's going to be all sorts of different times when people are coming up and they're going to offer you counterfeit armor. And they might even have the best intentions, but that's when we need to step back and say, God, I need your armor. What does that look like? God, help me to have your armor. Help me to have your presence. Help me to have your peace. Help me to trust in you like David did with Goliath, to realize that it's not even my fight. I just have to walk through, and you're going to fight this battle for me. And God, even if I get wounded, or even if this battle doesn't end up how I want this battle to be, God, I know you have the war of my eternity in focus, and that's what you're most concerned about, and that's what's most important anyway. And so help me also to stay focused when I'm put on all this armor. When I'm ready for battle, God, help me to stay focused on the war of eternity rather than just the battle of today. And if we can do that, I'm not saying life is going to be a bowl of roses. I'm not saying, oh my goodness, it'll be easy peasy. I mentioned a couple times, we're in a battle. I don't know of any battle that's easy. I don't know of any battle that's not scary from time to time. But I do know that when we can really grasp and understand, God, I am putting on your armor, and God, you are fighting this battle. It's your fight, and you're there with me. that there can be a peace. And that through following his will, we can stay focused on eternity rather than today. We're going to face battles, folks. All right, I would love to be just one of those pastors who are like, I'll become a Christian, you'll be rich, you'll never get sick, it'll be wonderful. Send me your money. Right? But I'm going to be an honest pastor to you and say, hey, it's not always going to be easy. But I will say this, there will be times when there is great celebration and there is great joy. And even if we don't get to experience all of that now and here, even if we experience some hard struggles, we can know God is always there. My little nephew, well, he's not little now, he's thinking, guys, married, has a kid. But when he was little, he reached up and pulled a pot of boiling water down and burnt his chest. And in order to let that heal properly, so it wouldn't scar, you have to let it heal from the inside out, but you don't want it to get infected. And so his mom and his dad had to scrub that burn. And Trent, just a little guy. So he was at my mom and dad's house when they were having to start scrubbing him. And my dad had this little ceramic clown that was a music box. And when you turned it on, he would whistle the song Memories from Cats. And so to distract him, they turned on that music box. And so every time that they went to have to scrub Trent, the clown's name was Whistling Willie. And he'd just go, Willie? Willie? He just wanted Willie there. Now, just his presence. Trent was like, I just want him there. I'm going to go through this. I just want him there. Guys, we have more than Whistling Willie. We have the Creator of all. When we go through trials, he's saying, put on my armor because you're going to need it. This one might be tough. You might get wounded. But I'm going to be there. I'm not forgetting you. I'm not sending you out there alone. And the ultimate victory is just straight ahead. And it's going to be so much longer than this battle is. Put on my full armor. This is for you. So my challenge to you, and to me, is, are you fighting your battles? Are you claiming these battles for yourself, or are you realizing, hey, you know what? This is God's fight. Yeah, I'm in there too, but God is here and it's his fight. And so I'm going to wear the armor that he gives me to wear. Even if others think it's silly, I'm going to live the life God wants me to live, and I'm going to wear his armor. I'm going to wear his uniform because I'm on his team. And can you stay focused on the eternal rather than just the struggle of today? And I would encourage you one more thing. Ask God to search your heart. Ask him to find the counterfeit armor that you've been wearing and allow him to replace it with his armor. And just see the difference it's going to make. Folks, if you can try, if you want to, you have the right and the ability to put on false armor. But that's going to lead to ruin. Put on God's armor. Put on God's armor. The true armor that will truly, really protect and lead you to an eternity with him. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much that you are a God who loves and cares for us. God, it doesn't mean that we won't face battles. In fact, Jesus told us in this world we will have trouble. But we can trust that you are there with us through every fight, through every injury, every wound. God, there are times that we've been protected by you from things that maybe we've never even knew were coming our way, but never injured us because of your protection. God, help us to realize where we're wearing counterfeit armor. And give us the boldness and the faith to replace it with your armor. And help us to stay focused on the war of eternity and not just get lost in the battle of today. In your name we pray.